As the war in Gaza heats up and the Israeli operations on the ground now enter a new stage to where instead of just surrounding the area, now they're actually doing a lot of the ground operations, the house to house and sometimes room to room fighting. And things are getting really, really bad on the ground. Now, of course, as we've been talking about here at Deep Dive, there's already been lots of protests around the world. There has been lots of angst in the Middle East among the Arabs because of the high number of civilian casualties. And we've been talking about some of the problems that this is going to cause. And in fact, about a week ago, I went on a newscast and I warned about some of the possibilities that could emanate for Israel in addition to the tactical fight on the ground.
The problem for Israel is not just the rules of engagement issue, but it's also their support in the West. And it's already starting to erode. And this is something that the IDF leadership is going to have to come to grapple with, because if these kinds of images keep getting out there and you get more and more protests in the West, and it undermines the support for the IDF. And look, they haven't even gone into the major parts of Gaza City yet. Much more is probably still to come. And if Israel loses its support in the West, it could have a really negative impact on their ability to even continue the war.
Now, since that broadcast was made, Israel has gone in on the ground. And now then, just as was easily predicted, in fact, it couldn't have been any other way, the casualties have been continuing to rise. And there has been additional problems for the Israelis to maintain both Western support and the even concurrence among the Arabs in the region like that. So earlier today, on CNN, I believe it was CNN, there was a report out on exactly these issues.
We are getting some reports of angst and anxiety from within the Biden administration as Israeli forces seem to show no signs of letting up their relentless bombardment of Gaza. As the civilian death toll in Gaza climbed, one senior administration official says that it has created, quote, a great moral anxiety. CNN's Nick Robertson has more on the offensive and the unease in Washington over how the military campaign is unfolding.
As crushing as Israel's airstrikes targeting Hamas are militarily, they've also become politically counterproductive. A crippling consequence: civilians, thousands of them, have been killed. Israel under US pressure for a humanitarian pause.
On the diplomatic front, we are working around the clock to provide the IDF with international maneuvering room for continued military activity.
Netanyahu's plan to destroy Hamas is under threat. Time may be running out.
The two clocks, one of how long will it take the IDF to finish what they see as their target, and second, how long are the international community, and specifically the US, would tolerate the continuation of this ground offensive. Those two are not in sync.
I am afraid that the United States will succeed in stopping us from completing the work.
Both Ben Yishai and Bergman are respected veteran Israeli journalists. Both have been taken by the IDF to the front line in Gaza.
None of the strategic goals of this operation has been achieved. Hamas are not going out of the tunnels.
According to the IDF, Hamas operatives killed, rockets captured, launch sites discovered. But according to Ben Yishai, at a pace that both Netanyahu and Biden can stomach.
They go very slowly because of two things. First of all, because of the Americans, to be honest. And secondly, because of the safety of the soldiers.
Okay, you see there, that's within Israeli society itself. Those two reporters there were both very highly regarded, very well experienced in the international. They're both very pro-Israel, but you see, one is very much of the mindset that Israel is going to have to continue to do this, and they actually are aggravated at the United States for seeming to put the brakes on or to put any constraints on their operation. And then you see the other one also within Israeli society saying, hey, you know what? We have to be careful about how we do this, because if we lose Western support, then the whole thing gets put in danger. Many in Israeli, especially in the military, aren't even concerned about that. I think it's pretty self-evident that they're saying, no, this is what we have to do for our long-term security, and we're going to go ahead and do it, whatever. Now, it's up to the President Biden to decide how much or if at all to put any like strings on our support. And that means financial as well as moral support, both of which are absolutely vital to the Israeli operation here for reasons we've talked about before. Now, also, we have seen just over a week ago, large-scale protests in the West. There was one here in Washington, D.C., where there was 300,000 people that were marching. Never in history has there been such a large protest in Washington, D.C. for the Palestinian people. And we see it all over the place. There was another one in London, as we're showing on the screen right there. Many other cities around the world, especially in Europe. That one right there was in Berlin. So you see that's already starting to happen. And that was before a lot of the ground incursions started to go on. And, we also have a previous edition of Deep Dive where we talked about what's happening in the region. And that was with, especially in Turkey, a little over a week ago as well, to where there were 1 million people had met in, I believe it was Ankara, and Erdogan spoke to them in very, very harsh anti-Israeli language, which just fired the crowd up. So you see, those issues are very real. Now, this war is just over a month old, and they have only now completed really surrounding the city of Gaza. Gary, if you can bring up that Google Earth map, I want to kind of show people just kind of what we have to face here. Now, this is the Gaza Strip here, and you see, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and you can see that as we've, I think, shown before, their Israeli Defense Forces are moving in. They've tried to cut Gaza City off from the south right there. They've gone into this Bet Hanon area in the northeast, and now down along the coast in the northwest. And now then, let's just show you a little bit about just how dense and populated this area is. Now, I'm just going to go in and zoom in here on this one area here and just look how many individual buildings are so tightly packed. And there was other reporting out this morning that Israel said that, about every 1 to sometimes 3 buildings have a significant tunnel network underneath them. Now, just look as I continue to just slowly scan across the city. I mean, there are blocks and blocks and blocks where hundreds of thousands of people live. And you see, it just never stops. You can understand that if you have to go building by building to get the Hamas fighters out, this is going to take a long time. And the casualty counts are going to continue to go up. And there's going to continue to be pressure on Israel to have these humanitarian pauses, which they have agreed to do based on what President Biden has told them in just the last few days. But they didn't want to. They didn't want to have that done. They want to just keep the pressure on, and they're not even willing to talk about ceasefires. That's not even on the table at the moment. And there's no evidence that the White House is going to put any pressure on them towards that end. But you see that all of these dynamics that have been in play are very possibly going to expand in the coming days, weeks, and months. And if this does continue to take on months, you see that Israel's going to have some very, very difficult challenges to try to decide how far do we go tactically to eliminate Hamas, and how far do we go humanitarian-wise to maintain the support in the West, especially the United States, because pretty much the West will follow what happens in the United States. And if it goes south here, it's going to go south elsewhere. If he can maintain it in the United States, it's going to be maintained in other places as well. And then that also includes in the Middle East. And the U.S. has been Secretary of State Blinken, Secretary of Defense Austin, continue to crisscross the area to try to do that very thing, to keep the war from expanding and to keep the lid on the Arab Street and the Muslims in the region, to make sure that we don't lose. Not only do we not lose their support, but they don't actively act on the behalf of the Hamas side and to try to join this war, especially in Hezbollah in Lebanon. That's the biggest problem there. But there is going to be a real issue with how this thing unfolds, really, let's just say over the next couple of months, between now and the end of the year. And here's part of the reason why this is such a conundrum. The Hamas side continues to say they could care less how many Palestinians die. They could care less their own lives. They will fight to the death. And so far, we've seen tactically they have some hit and run operations against the Israeli Defense Forces. They have destroyed a handful of tanks and armored personnel carriers with rocket-propelled grenades. But for the most part, they are still staying in the tunnels. And that is incredibly difficult. That is one of the, and maybe the most difficult tactical task that any army can face, when you not only have to go building by building and sometimes room by room, but you also have to go into the tunnels. And that is an extremely difficult and high casualty producing operation to go. So this cannot go fast because the Hamas fighters have buried themselves, really throughout these massive tunnel complex. And I can assure you that even with all the bombs that you've seen so far, Israel has only gotten a small portion of those tunnels. So what it's going to require is, or what you have at stake here is you have one side that is absolutely committed to this and they are ready to go to the death. You have the other side, the Israeli side, that says they have to complete this tactical military operation in order to make their people safe. And there is no negotiation. Neither side is even willing to talk about a negotiated settlement to end this. Unlike, say, the Russia-Ukraine war, which that one actually they're in the state right now where both sides, after 20 months of war, are willing to actually possibly contemplate having a negotiated settlement. And really, the supporters on both sides are saying, yeah, we might need to do that. This case is so difficult because nobody on either side is even contemplating talking to the other. Now, who knows after, if this drags on well into next year, maybe that dynamic could change. But the issue for Tel Aviv right now is that they've got to get to there. They have to protect their citizens. They have to protect their troops. They can't suffer too many casualties. I mean, their whole army is only 400,000 with all of their troops mobilized. So they can't get into a very high casualty producing long-term strategy because they don't have the troops to handle it. And of course, neither does Hamas. They can't add any to what they've got. They have limited as well. But this is something we're going to continue to watch here and pay a lot of attention to because the risk is so high for Israel. It's so high for the Arabs in the region, and it is very high for the United States as well. We have got to try and thread this needle to get it just right so that we support our ally, but we also don't alienate others in the region that could potentially worsen our own conditions and, God forbid, could actually help expand the war, which, of course, is what Hamas wants. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that just how challenging and difficult things are for Israel, and this war is a long way from being over. And there's, so many political and military landmines that have to be negotiated. But we're going to be here to all the way through, every step of the way. We remain unintimidated and uncompromised. We are going to bring you the truth, no matter how ugly it is, whether somebody likes it or doesn't like it, because you deserve to know the ground truth reality. And here at Deep Dive, we're going to keep giving it to you. Thanks. Remember to like and subscribe, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Deep Dive.